The single flickering candle on the tiny cupcake cast a pathetic, dancing shadow against the cavernous marble of our dining room. It was my 30th birthday, a milestone that was supposed to be celebrated with laughter and champagne, with friends and the boisterous, loving chaos of family. Instead, it was just me and Damien, separated by 10 feet of polished mahogany that felt like a continent. He hadn't looked up from his phone in 20 minutes. The silence in the room was a living thing, heavy and suffocating, broken only by the hum of the wine fridge and the frantic thumping of my own heart. I cleared my throat, the sound unnaturally loud. "Damien?" He grunted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his handsome features before they settled back into a mask of digital absorption. "1 second, Ilara. Closing a deal." It was always a deal, a contract, a merger, an entity that demanded more of his passion and attention than I ever could. For 5 years, I had been the perfect millionaire's wife. I hosted his galas, charmed his business partners, and curated our life into a portrait of effortless success. I had decorated this house, turning its cold, modern shell into a warm, breathing home. But lately, I felt like another one of his acquisitions, one that had lost its novelty and was now gathering dust on a shelf. My hand trembled as I rested it on my still flat stomach, a secret sanctuary of hope I had been guarding for weeks. This was my last resort. The ace up my sleeve I prayed would be enough to win him back from the brink of whatever abyss was swallowing him. "I have something to tell you," I said, my voice a whisper. He finally set the phone down, the screen dark, and gave me his full attention. For a fleeting second, I saw the man I fell in love with, the charming, bright-eyed entrepreneur who saw a kindred spirit in a struggling artist. "What is it?" he asked, his tone softening, perhaps sensing the gravity in my own. I took a deep breath, a shaky smile playing on my lips. "We're going to have a baby." The words hung in the air between us. I expected a surge of joy, a whoop of excitement, the closing of that 10-foot distance in a single bound. I expected to be swept into his arms, for the coldness of the past few months to melt away in the heat of this miraculous news. Instead, his face went blank. Not with shock, but with a chilling, hollow emptiness. The warmth in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a look of calculated dread. He stood up, not to come to me, but to pace by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city lights. "A baby," he stated, the words flat, devoid of emotion. "Ilara, we talked about this. The timing is not right." "The timing?" My voice cracked. "Damien, we've been married for 5 years. When would the timing ever be right?" He turned to face me, and the man I loved was gone completely. In his place stood a stranger, his eyes as cold and hard as the glass he stood before. "I've met someone," he said, the sentence delivered like a final, fatal blow. The cupcake, the candle, the cavernous room, it all blurred into a vortex of nausea and disbelief. The secret I held in my womb, my precious beacon of hope, had become the catalyst for my world's complete and utter destruction. My 30th birthday, the day my life truly began, and the day it irrevocably ended. Have you ever felt a deep, gut-wrenching certainty that something beautiful was about to end? The name of the other woman was Amelia. Damien spoke it with a detached reverence that sliced me deeper than any curse word could. She was a colleague, he said, a partner in a new venture. He spoke of her brilliance, her ambition, her understanding of the pressures he faced, each word a thinly veiled comparison, each compliment a stone cast at me. I sat there, frozen, my hand still protectively over my womb, a shield that felt impossibly fragile against the onslaught. How long? I finally managed to ask, the words scraping my throat raw. A few months, he admitted, refusing to meet my eyes. He was still pacing, a caged animal, but the cage was of his own making. Ilara, I never meant to hurt you. The classic, cowardly line. It was a sentence designed not to soothe the wounded, but to absolve the executioner. It was a plea for his own peace of mind, not for mine. You never meant to hurt me. I stood up, the chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. My entire body was vibrating with a cocktail of rage and heartbreak, so potent it threatened to tear me apart. You stood before my family and friends, Damien. You put this ring on my finger and promised me a lifetime. You built this life with me. And now, when I am carrying your child, you tell me you've met someone? When exactly, in that sequence of events, did you think I wouldn't be hurt? He had no answer. He just stared out the window, his reflection a ghostly silhouette against the city he had conquered. That city had been our playground, the backdrop to our love story. Now, it felt like a silent witness to my humiliation. The next few days were a blur of cold shoulders and whispered phone calls in rooms he thought I couldn't hear. He moved into one of the guest suites, a chasm of unspoken words and shared memories separating our beds. The home I had poured my soul into became a prison. Every object, every photograph, was a testament to a love that was now a lie. My morning sickness was a bitter, constant reminder of the baby that was meant to bind us together, but was now tearing us apart. I found myself clinging to memories, desperate to find the point where it all went wrong. My mind kept returning to a single, perfect day 3 years ago. We were on our second anniversary trip, staying in a rustic villa surrounded by olive groves. The air was thick with the scent of lavender and cypress. Damien had surprised me with a private cooking class. I remember the feel of the flour on my hands, the deep, hearty laugh that escaped him when I accidentally dusted his nose with it. He looked so carefree, so utterly present. Later that afternoon, we sat on a stone terrace overlooking the rolling hills, a bottle of local Chianti between us. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and rose, the colors so vibrant they looked like one of my own paintings. He took my hand, his thumb tracing circles over my knuckles. "You see all this?" he said, his voice soft, gesturing to the breathtaking landscape. "It's beautiful, but it's just a view. You, Ilara, you're the masterpiece. You bring the color to my life." I had leaned my head on his shoulder, my heart so full I thought it might burst. "I love you, Damien," I whispered. "And I love you," he replied, sealing the promise with a kiss that tasted of wine and sunshine. "Always. Don't you ever forget that." I remembered that promise now, and the memory was a fresh wound. The man who had called me his masterpiece now saw me as a flawed sketch, ready to be discarded. The breaking point came a week after my birthday. I was in the kitchen, trying to force down some toast, when he walked in, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. He placed a thick, leather-bound folder on the granite countertop. "My lawyer drew this up," he said, his tone all business. "It's a separation agreement. It's generous. He was offering me money to disappear, to take his problem and vanish from his pristine, new life with Amelia. The toast turned to acid in my stomach. "I don't want your money, Damien," I said, my voice dangerously quiet. "Then what do you want, Ilara?" he snapped, his patience finally wearing thin. "To stay here? To watch me move on? To make this harder than it needs to be?" "I want the man I married," I cried, the tears I had been suppressing finally breaking free. "I want the father of my child to love us. I want the promise you made me in Tuscany." He flinched at the mention of Italy, a flicker of something, guilt, regret, crossing his face before it was gone. "That man is gone," he said, his voice flat. "People change." "No," I said, wiping my tears with the back of my hand, a sudden, cold resolve solidifying in my chest. "You didn't change. You just finally revealed who you truly are, a coward." His jaw tightened. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken resentment. Finally, he delivered the final, crushing blow. "I want you out," he said, the words hanging in the air like poison. "Amelia is moving in at the end of the month. I need you to be gone by then." He was forcing me out of our home, out of our life. Pregnant, heartbroken, and utterly alone, I was being evicted from my own fairy tale. The resolve I felt just moments before crumbled, replaced by a terrifying, all-consuming fear. But beneath the fear, a tiny, resilient ember of defiance began to glow. He could take my home, he could take my heart, but I would not let him take my dignity. "Fine," I said, my voice shaking but firm. "I'll leave. But you will live to regret this. You will realize one day that you didn't just lose a wife. You threw away a family." I turned and walked away, not giving him the satisfaction of seeing my complete breakdown. As I packed a small suitcase with trembling hands, I knew this wasn't just an exit. It was an escape. An escape from a man who was a stranger, and from a love that had become a beautiful, suffocating cage. The pain was an ocean, threatening to drown me. But for the sake of the tiny life growing inside me, I had to learn how to swim. Leaving the sleek, minimalist fortress Damien and I had called home felt like shedding a skin. Each step I took down that long, marble hallway was a step away from the woman I had been. The wife, the hostess, the curator of a life that was never truly my own. I didn't take much. A few clothes, my box of paints and brushes, and a framed photo from that day in Tuscany, a relic of a promise I now knew was built on sand. I left the designer clothes, the jewelry, the life of a millionaire's wife behind. They were props for a role I was no longer playing. I drove for an hour with no destination in mind, the city lights blurring through my tears. The weight of my new reality was crushing. I was 30 years old, pregnant, jobless, and homeless. My own family lived across the country, and I was too ashamed to call them to admit the spectacular failure my perfect life had become. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind with flickering neon signs and sheets that smelled faintly of bleach and despair. That first night, I didn't sleep. I just lay on the lumpy mattress, my hand on my belly, and let the grief wash over me in waves. I mourned the husband I thought I had, the future I thought we would share, and the family we would never be. Fear was a cold, constant companion. How would I provide for this child? Where would we live? How could I possibly do this alone? The next few days were a study in survival. I lived off vending machine snacks and tried to figure out my next move. I had a degree in graphic design, but I'd let my career go dormant to support Damien's. My portfolio was outdated, my contacts cold. The world felt impossibly large and indifferent. It was on the fourth day, as I was staring at the dregs of my bank account online, that my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. My heart leaped, a foolish, traitorous part of me hoping it was Damien, filled with remorse. But it wasn't. "Elara, it's Beatrice." The voice was crisp, formal, and instantly recognizable. Beatrice Delacroix, Damien's mother, my mother-in-law. A woman as formidable and elegant as her ancestral name. In all my years with Damien, our interactions had been pleasant but distant. She was polite, impeccably dressed, and always held a certain reserve, as if she were appraising me, waiting to see if I was worthy of the family name. I always felt she saw me as a pretty, artistic diversion for her son, not a permanent fixture. I braced myself for a lecture, for a defense of her son's deplorable behavior. "Beatrice," I said, my voice hoarse. "Where are you?" she asked, her tone direct, cutting through any pretense. I'm fine," I lied. "Don't lie to me, Alara. I know my son. He is a brilliant man, but he has a streak of recklessness, a profound selfishness that I had hoped you had cured him of. I was wrong. Now, tell me where you are." There was no pity in her voice, but there was something else. A current of steel, of command. I found myself telling her everything: the motel, the fear, the pregnancy. I spoke without tears, my voice flat with exhaustion. She was silent for a long moment when I finished. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing on the other end. "Pack your things," she said finally. "I am sending a car. It will be there in 30 minutes. "A car? Where are you taking me?" "Home," she said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. And then she hung up. True to her word, a sleek, black town car pulled up to my dingy motel room exactly 30 minutes later. The driver, a kind-faced man named Arthur, who had worked for the Delacroix family for decades, loaded my single suitcase and box of paints into the trunk without a word. We didn't drive towards the city, towards the penthouse I had shared with Damien. Instead, we headed east, towards the old, moneyed suburbs, where sprawling estates hid behind stone walls and ancient oak trees. We pulled up to a magnificent, ivy-covered Georgian mansion, the kind of place that seemed to exist outside of time. This was the Delacroix ancestral home, the house where Damien had grown up, a place I had only visited a handful of times for stiff holiday dinners. Beatrice was waiting for me at the door, standing tall and regal in a simple cashmere sweater and slacks. There were no airs, no grand pronouncements. She simply looked at me, her sharp blue eyes, the same eyes her son possessed, but hers held a wisdom his lacked, softening with an emotion I couldn't quite name. "You look exhausted, child," she said, her voice softer now. "Come in. You're safe here." She led me through a grand foyer, past portraits of stern-faced ancestors, and into a warm, sun-drenched library filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and comfortable, worn leather armchairs. A fire crackled in the hearth. She motioned for me to sit and poured 2 cups of tea from a silver service. "I will not make excuses for my son," she began, handing me a cup. "What he has done is unforgivable. It is a stain on our family's honor. He has chosen his path, and in doing so, he has abdicated his responsibility." I just nodded, unsure of what to say. "That child you are carrying," she continued, her gaze direct and unwavering, "is a Delacroix. He may not want to be its father, but I will be its grandmother, and you, Alara, are its mother. That makes you family. In fact, that makes you more family than he is at this moment." She stood and walked over to a heavy oak desk, retrieving a set of keys and a thick vellum envelope sealed with wax. She placed them on the table in front of me. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "These are the keys to this house," she said simply. "And this," she tapped the envelope, "is the deed. I had my lawyer draw it up this morning. I am signing the title of the house over to you and to my grandchild. This is your home now." I stared at her, dumbfounded. The sheer magnitude of the gesture was incomprehensible. "Beatrice, I can't accept this. This is your home. This house needs life in it." she said, a sad smile touching her lips. It needs the sound of laughter again. It needs the pitter-patter of little feet. My husband is gone. My son has abandoned his legacy. This house, this legacy, it belongs to the future now. It belongs to you and that baby. She placed her cool, dry hand over mine. He left you with nothing. I am giving you everything. Let him have his glass tower in the city with his fleeting affair. You will have a foundation. You will have roots. You will have a home. Tears streamed down my face, but for the first time in weeks, they were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of overwhelming, incomprehensible gratitude. A woman I barely knew, a woman I had always found intimidating, had just thrown me the most incredible lifeline. In the wreckage of my old life, she had single-handedly laid the foundation for a new one. She had not just given me a mansion. She had given me a sanctuary, a future, and a fighting chance. Living in the Delacroix mansion was like stepping into another century. The air smelled of beeswax, old paper, and roses from the sprawling gardens. The silence was different from the tense, heavy silence of the penthouse. Here, it was a peaceful, breathing silence, filled with the ticking of grandfather clocks and the distant song of birds. For the first few weeks, I felt like a ghost haunting its grand halls, overwhelmed by Beatrice's monumental act of faith and terrified I would somehow prove unworthy of it. Beatrice, however, gave me no time to wallow. She was a woman of action, not sentiment. She seemed to understand that the best cure for a broken heart was purpose. That guest wing at the east end of the house has been neglected for years, she announced one morning over breakfast. The light in there is wonderful. You're an artist, Elara. Make it your own. Turn it into your studio. Give it life again. It was a brilliant suggestion. It was a project, a focus, something to pour my anxious energy into, besides the well-being of my growing baby. I spent my days covered in dust and paint. I tore up old, musty carpets to reveal beautiful hardwood floors. I painted the walls in warm, creamy whites and soft blues, colors that felt like hope. Arthur, the kind driver, would help me move heavy furniture, never asking questions, always with a quiet, encouraging smile. Slowly, painstakingly, I was not just renovating a wing of a house. I was rebuilding myself. Each stroke of the paintbrush was an act of defiance. Each design choice was a declaration of my own identity, separate from Damien. This wasn't his sleek, cold aesthetic. It was mine. It was warm and a little bohemian, and filled with light. As my belly swelled, so did my confidence. I unearthed my old portfolio, and cringing, began to update it with new designs, sketches, and concepts I'd created in the quiet evenings. Beatrice would often come and sit with me in the new studio, watching me work, a cup of herbal tea in her hand. Our relationship bloomed in that sunlit room. She was no longer just Damien's mother. She became my mentor, my confidant, my friend. She told me stories of her own life, of marrying into the powerful Delacroix family, of the loneliness she felt, of the struggles she faced, raising a headstrong son after her husband passed away. He was always like this, she confided one afternoon, looking at a half-finished watercolor I was painting of the rose garden. Brilliant, charming, but with a hollow space inside him. Always chasing the next thrill, the next conquest. I think, in his own way, he truly loved you, Elara. But he doesn't know how to love what is good and steady. He only knows how to conquer. And once you were conquered, he grew restless. Her words didn't excuse his actions, but they offered a sliver of understanding that eased a small part of my pain. It wasn't that I wasn't enough. It was that he was too broken to accept what I offered. With Beatrice's encouragement, I started a small, freelance graphic design business from my new studio. I reached out to an old colleague from before my marriage, and to my surprise, she had a project for me, designing a logo for a new local bakery. The pay was modest, a pittance compared to the allowance Damien used to give me. But when that first check arrived, addressed to Ilara Vance, my maiden name, I held it in my hand and cried. It was the first money I had earned for myself in over 5 years. It was proof of my independence. It was mine. Small wins became my lifeline. The first successful client, finishing the nursery, a beautiful, serene room painted with murals of gentle animals and starry skies, feeling the baby's first powerful kick as Beatrice and I assembled the crib. We weren't just a pregnant woman and her mother-in-law. We were a team, building a nest for this new life. I sometimes heard snippets about Damien and Amelia from Beatrice, who still had her sources in the city. Their glamorous life was apparently not as idyllic as I imagined. There were reports of public arguments, of Amelia's frustration with Damien's workaholism, of the hollowness of a relationship built on the ruins of another. I took no pleasure in this, but it did serve as a quiet, steady confirmation. I had not lost a prize. I had escaped a disaster. One evening, as I stood in the finished nursery, looking at the tiny clothes we had folded and the mobile of felt stars hanging over the crib, Beatrice came and stood beside me. "You've done a beautiful job, Ilara," she said softly. "We've done a beautiful job," I corrected her, smiling. She placed a hand on my arm, her expression serious. "I want you to understand something. This house, this support, it does not come with strings. I am not buying your loyalty. When this baby is born, you are free. You can stay here for the rest of your life, or you can take your child and build a new life elsewhere. You owe me nothing. Your only duty is to that baby, and to your own happiness." It was the greatest gift she could have given me. Not the mansion, not the money, but the freedom. The permission to be my own person, to make my own choices, to build a future on my own terms. As I stood there, 8 months pregnant, surrounded by the quiet strength of the home I had built and the unwavering support of the woman who had become my family, I realized I was no longer the broken, terrified woman who had checked into a motel 6 months ago. I was strong. I was a survivor. And I was ready to be a mother. The day Damien returned was a Tuesday in early autumn. The leaves on the ancient oaks had begun to turn, painting the grounds in fiery shades of crimson and gold. I was in my studio, putting the finishing touches on a website design for a new client, the afternoon sun streaming through the large windows. I was 9 months pregnant, a week past my due date, and felt as large and serene as a planet orbiting the sun of my impending motherhood. Arthur appeared at the door, his expression troubled. "Mum," he said, his voice low. "There's someone here to see you. It's Mr. Damien." My heart didn't leap. It didn't sink. It just gave a steady, solid thud. I placed my hand on my belly, a gesture that was now second nature, a silent communication with my child. "We're okay. We're safe." "It's all right, Arthur," I said, my voice calm. "Show him in." He walked into my studio, and the change in him was jarring. The impeccably tailored suit was gone, replaced by jeans and a rumpled shirt. The confident, arrogant swagger had vanished. He looked tired, gaunt, and profoundly lost. His eyes, those same sharp blue eyes as his mother's, darted around the room, my room, taking in the vibrant paintings, the organized chaos of my work, the sheer life that pulsed within its walls. Then his gaze fell on my belly, and a look of such profound, gut-wrenching anguish crossed his face that I almost felt a pang of pity for him. "Ilara," he breathed, his voice raspy. "Damien," I replied, my tone even. I didn't stand. I stayed seated in my chair, the queen in her own small, self-made kingdom. He took a hesitant step forward. "You look beautiful." "I'm pregnant," I stated, not as an accusation, but as a simple fact. It tends to have that effect. He flinched. Can we talk?" "We are talking." He raked a hand through his unkempt hair, the picture of a man unraveling. "It's over," he said. "With Amelia. It's been over for a while. It was a mistake. A catastrophic, life-ruining mistake." He began to pace, just as he had on that awful birthday night. But now his movements were agitated, desperate. "It wasn't real, Ilara. None of it. It was a fantasy, an escape. I was suffocating under the pressure of the business, of everything, and I was a fool. I thought she was the answer, but she was just another transaction. All we did was fight. She hated that I worked so much. She wasn't you. No one is you." He stopped in front of my desk, his eyes pleading. "I've been in hell, a hell of my own making. I wake up every morning, and the first thing I feel is this crushing weight of what I've done. I lost everything. I lost my home, my wife, my family." His voice broke. "I lost my child before I even had a chance to know them." He finally looked me in the eye, and I saw tears welling up. They were real. This wasn't the cold stranger who had evicted me. This was a broken man, drowning in the consequences of his own actions. "I am so sorry, Ilara," he whispered, the words raw and full of pain. "That's not enough. I know it's not. But it's all I have. I was cruel and selfish and unforgivably blind. I threw away the only real, beautiful thing in my life for an illusion. I'm sorry I destroyed our family. I'm sorry I wasn't the man you deserved." He gestured around the room. "My mother told me what she did. She gave you the house. And you've made it a home again. Something I never could." His eyes fell on the door to the adjoining room, the nursery. He took a step towards it, then stopped, as if held back by an invisible wall. "Can I?" I gave a slight nod. He pushed the door open gently and stepped inside. I heard a sharp intake of breath. I knew what he was seeing: the soft colors, the mural of the starry sky, the tiny clothes, the empty crib waiting expectantly. He was seeing the tangible, fully realized evidence of the life he had so casually discarded. He stayed in there for a long time. When he came out, his face was wet with tears. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's too much to ask. But I am asking. I am begging for a second chance. Let me come home. Let me be a father to our child. I'll do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll sell the company. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Please, Ilara, don't make me live without you." He stood before me, stripped of all his power and wealth, offering me his broken heart. And in that moment, I felt the last vestiges of my anger and resentment dissolve, replaced by a calm, quiet clarity. I took a deep breath. "The Ilara you're asking for, Damien, she doesn't exist anymore," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You broke her, and I had to pick up her pieces and build someone new. This woman," I gestured to myself, to my belly, to my studio, "is not your wife. She is a mother, and her first, last, and only priority is the peace and stability of her child." I stood up, my body heavy, but my spirit light. I believe your apology is sincere, and for my own peace, I accept it. I forgive you. But forgiveness is not reconciliation. You can't unshatter a mirror. You said you threw away the only real thing in your life. You're right, you did. And you have to learn to live with that. But I can't go back. I can't risk this peace, this life that I have built from the ashes of what you burned down. A single tear traced a path down his cheek. He nodded slowly, a man accepting his sentence. Can I be a part of the baby's life? He asked, his voice small. As a father. That is a bridge we will cross when we come to it, I said. It is a right you will have to earn, not one you are entitled to. You can start by getting yourself healthy. For real this time. Not for me. For yourself. And for the child you hope to know one day. He looked at me. A long, searching gaze, as if memorizing the face of the woman he had lost. I understand, he whispered. He turned and walked out of the studio, out of the house, and out of my life, leaving behind only the quiet hum of the autumn afternoon. I walked to the window and watched his car disappear down the long, tree-lined drive. I felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a profound, quiet sadness for the man he could have been, and a deep, unwavering peace for the woman I had become. I placed my hand on my belly, where a sudden, strong contraction tightened in response. It was time. My new life was about to begin. My daughter was born just as the sun was rising the next day, painting the sky in the same soft, hopeful hues I had used for her nursery walls. We named her Lily Beatrice Vance. Lily for new beginnings and the purity of a love that was all my own. Beatrice for the woman who had become my rock, my family, my savior. And Vance for the woman who had found her own strength. Holding her in my arms for the first time was not a cinematic explosion of feeling, but a quiet, profound settling. It was the feeling of a missing piece of my soul clicking into place. Her tiny fingers curled around mine, her small, perfect face a testament to a future that was mine to shape. Life settled into a new rhythm, dictated by feedings, lullabies, and the boundless love I felt for my daughter. The mansion, once a symbol of inherited power and old money, transformed into a warm, sprawling playground for one tiny, gurgling queen. Beatrice was a doting, hands-on grandmother, her formal reserve melting away completely in the face of Lily's innocent charm. Our family was small and unconventional, a new mother, a grandmother, and a baby girl. But it was whole. It was built not on vows or contracts, but on a foundation of fierce, unconditional love and mutual respect. My freelance business thrived. My work, now infused with the purpose of providing for my daughter, took on a new depth and creativity. I hired another designer to help with the workload. I was no longer just surviving. I was flourishing. Damien kept his distance. True to his word, he began the hard work of fixing himself. Beatrice would receive quiet updates from his therapist. He sold a majority stake in his company, stepping back from the high-pressure world that had consumed him. He sent gifts for Lily, but always through his mother, respecting the boundary I had set. There were no more pleas, no more dramatic returns. Only a quiet, consistent effort to become a man worthy of being a father. About a year later, on a bright spring afternoon, I was in the garden with Lily, who was taking wobbly, triumphant first steps on the soft grass. Beatrice came out to join us, a letter in her hand. "It's from Damien," she said. "He wants to know if he can see her. He suggests a public place, a park, for an hour. He says he will understand if the answer is no." I looked down at my daughter. her face alight with the joy of her newfound mobility. She was secure, she was happy, she was so deeply loved. She deserved to know her father, but she also deserved to be protected. I looked at Beatrice, my partner in this journey, and saw the question in her eyes. I had the power to say no, to keep that door closed forever. But looking at Lily, I knew that true strength wasn't about building walls, but about having the courage to build bridges carefully and on your own terms. "Tell him yes," I said, a sense of peace settling over me. "Tell him we'll meet him at the Botanical Gardens on Sunday." That Sunday, I saw Damien for the first time in over a year. He looked healthier, calmer. The frantic energy was gone, replaced by a quiet humility. He didn't try to hug me or overstep. He just looked at Lily with an expression of pure wonder and regret. He had brought her a small, soft, stuffed bear. He sat on the grass, a few feet away, and simply watched her play, his eyes full of a gentle, heart-breaking love. I didn't know what the future held for us, if he would ever be more than a weekend visitor in our daughter's life. But I knew that I had made the right choice. My life wasn't a fairy tale that had ended in heartbreak. It was a real, complicated, beautiful story of a woman who had lost everything she thought she wanted, only to find everything she truly needed. Sometimes, life gives us storms not to destroy us, but to wash away what no longer serves us, clearing the path for a love that can truly grow. I had found that love, not in a millionaire's penthouse, but in a baby's smile, a grandmother's wisdom, and the quiet, unshakable strength I finally found within myself. If this story touched your heart, or if you've ever had to find strength in the middle of a storm, please give it a like, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and comment below with your own story of resilience. You are stronger than you know.